And happy July 4th. The 250th anniversary of America is today. Everyone's going to celebrate in their own way, but we'll probably have time after the show to maybe talk about that. But we have a lot to get into. I know this is probably one of the topics that we wanted to get into last show, but we didn't have enough time. So let's go ahead and jump into it because I know we got a few other stories we want to catch. So we want to have a nice little segmented show. So good morning, Senator, and let's go ahead and start off with the news of the fentanyl deaths in America.
Well, good morning, Morgan. This is going to be a good day. I think lots of people celebrating today. I'm going out to Luckett's, to the home of Jan and Sid Fearing. Jan was a tremendous hero. She had what amounted to an intelligence network that functioned for me and for her when we were trying to defend the constitutional government of Syria against an orchestrated terrorist war that was conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency with the assistance of Israel, with Great Britain. And they waged a brutal, just unspeakably brutal war against the Syrian people for 13 years with a complete military naval blockade, devaluing currency, beheading tens of thousands of people, a mass campaign of rape. And finally, the globalists overcame the people of this little country, and in any event, we were pretty instrumental in keeping the government from being overwhelmed by. At the time, it was a combination of ISIS and Al Qaeda, which were kind of interchangeable, and we managed to give them the upper hand, help them get the upper hand, and to conquer the terrorists who had invaded. The people of Syria hate these people. They hate the people who govern them now, which are Al Qaeda, installed by Joe Biden just before he left. He finally was able to put together this group of countries that Israel, the United States, Great Britain, Turkey, and they were able to swamp and just overturn the will of the Syrian people and put in place Al Qaeda, the same group that hit the Twin Towers on 9/11. So, in any event, she was a great hero of upholding the constitutional government, and so I'm going out there, and they have a great celebration out in the woods. It used to be it's a 200-year-old log cabin. It burned down. They rebuilt it pretty much as it was originally. And they have an interesting group. They have some Syrian patriots who come, but they also have a great number of blue-collar tradesmen from the whole region, the auto mechanics and plumbers, electricians, some people who are construction experts on data centers, and just all kinds of things. The people who really make the wheels turn.
Oh, wow.
So,
well, that should certainly be interesting. Wow.
Yeah,
I'll be spending it with my family. Won't be doing anything too crazy. Kind of keeping it small and close knit with just the family here. So I know
you have a great family, so it's be a good time.
I am very fortunate. Yes. So I know that we wanted to talk about it last week, which was the rates in the overdose in America, overdose deaths.
This is an interesting situation. It's a very good news story for America. And I think it's one that we probably would have been hearing a lot about had it not been that all the air is taken out of the room by the war in Iran. But I wanted to touch on it. During the time that President Trump has been in office, he has launched what I consider a real war on drugs. And throughout the country, the Mexican drug cartels they've reached tentacles into literally every little town and village, remote places, and up in the mountains and out in the woodlands, and they have installed drug mules everywhere, and it's just killing enormous numbers of young American kids, and the drug deaths reached a peak when President Joe Biden had encouraged just millions of aliens and drug gangs to pour across the southern borders into America, and many of them just openly, many of them were captured with drugs and so forth, and because they owed a lot of money to the cartels that ushered them into the United States, they would often pay for it by bringing backpacks full of drugs and delivering them for the cartels. And so President Biden was actively encouraging aliens and drug gangs to flood into America in 2022. And at that time, Centers for Disease Control reported 74,000 fentanyl overdose deaths. 74,000. Now, we all look back, and the last bloody war that we fought in this country was the Vietnam War back in my era. And it took us 10 years to have 58,000 Americans killed in that war. So in a single year under Joe Biden, we had quite a few more Americans die. They were killed by the drug cartels. And so what is really amazing is that, when Trump came in, he did not play footsies with the drug cartels. Now, there are a lot of, I'm telling you, there are a lot of congressmen, a lot of senators, a lot of people in the House of Representatives. They don't necessarily take direct payoffs from the drug cartels, but money has a way of moving, and it goes from this to that to the other. But I'll tell you, the cartels have enormous power over what we do and how we control the borders. And, Trump came into office, and for the first time ever, we truly got control over the borders. And so drug deaths peaked under President Biden in 2022. And under Trump, they have dropped to where every single year, the policies adopted by Donald Trump to control the borders, to actively go after the drug boats, and instead of playing footsies with them, just taking them out, bombing them, destroying them. And now the closed border anti-drug cartel policies are saving 30,000 American lives every single year. It is a dramatic story, one that we really ought to be hearing all the time. And it's just an amazing thing. And we still have lots of drug deaths in the country. But I'll tell you what, when you could save 30,000 kids' lives every single year, that is definitely a sterling achievement. And I think here on the 4th of July, it's one that we can certainly celebrate. And and I would hope that that Americans can at least band together and say, you know what, whether you like this technique or this one or that, saving 30,000 people's lives every year is a very big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, to a very highly concentrated drug that is fentanyl. It's tragic. It's it's gotten to the point where it does touch every single person, whether you know somebody within your family or or your friends, or it's you would be considered very blessed if this has not touched you in a way.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I mean, it is just everywhere, and the cartels they've had free reign. I mean, they have owned this country for the longest time. You would be surprised when I was in high school. I went to a high school with 4,000 to 5,000 people. It's a huge school, Miami Senior High School. People did not know what marijuana was. There had never been an incidence of drug use, to my knowledge, and drugs just were not a thing. And various things that happened that allowed drugs to begin flowing across the country have just caused tremendous deterioration in communities across America. So anytime we can roll things back, it's a big thing.
Still, yeah, there's still a lot to work on too.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a good step in the right direction, and it is still. I mean, these drugs are so prevalent. Some of these towns and communities are so widely affected. I think giving back to the opioid epidemic, that really kind of seems like that's kind of what has spiraled this way out of control, where these market for these heavy drugs has taken place. So I think that this is certainly something that we can all applaud, regardless of where we stand politically. That this is a good thing. This people surviving and people not being their lives ending too early.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I know that what was also in your notes that you gave me was something that normally I stay very up to date with the stuff that's going on in Palestine, but you had brought to my attention a doctor that has just been taken. Would you want to go into that?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah, this is there's a Palestinian doctor. He's a 71-year-old fellow. He's been doing this for many, many years, and he's known as the doctor of the poor, and he has sort of orchestrated this organized system where they provide medical care for people who are poor, people in the occupied West Bank. People there, they live under military rule. They have no freedom. The Israeli government does not allow freedom to people who are not part of the Jewish state. And what's going on is ever since this latest outburst of war has consumed Israel, they've developed a policy, and I don't know how. I don't know that they necessarily just have it in black and white, but it's quite clear that their policy is to destroy all of the medical facilities available to Palestinian people. And same thing in Lebanon. They're destroying all of the medical facilities in Lebanon. They're destroying the ambulances. They're destroying the clinics. They're destroying the hospitals. And what they do is they try to destroy all of the systems that support human life in an area that they want to take over they want to drive out all of the population. They want to kill them. or to expel them and just create levels of suffering that are just so inhuman that that people flee to escape, and then they can replace them with these Jewish settlers who, I tell you, they put the worst of the Nazis to shame. The Jewish settlers are as savage and vicious and nasty as any human beings. I mean, they sort of rank alongside the groups that we supported to overthrow Syria, the Al Qaeda and the ISIS. They're very similar in their ways. Now they don't behead people, but they do zip tie men's penises. We saw this recently with where there were a mob of over 20 Jewish settlers who burst into the home of very poor shepherds. It was a shepherd family that they tended their flock of sheep, much as Jesus used to speak of the shepherds all the time. He called himself a shepherd, and they burst in there. This is a multi-generational family with babies, with children, with young adults, with middle-aged people, with older people, and just had them all stripped naked. So you had grandparents standing there naked in front of the little children and children, and it was just hideous. Just being cruel, just to hurt people for no other purpose. And then and they took the patriarch of the family, middle-aged fellow who was the shepherd, and they stripped him in front of all of his children and everything. And then they beat him so savagely that he thought he was going to die, and they dragged him through the gravel. This is 20. This is not like one or two insane people. This is a large group of Jewish settlers. Drag him through the gravel, and then they zip tied his penis. I mean, these are hideous people. The Jewish settlers are hideous people.
Yeah. I think what we're kind of alluding to is this broader complacency with that policy. It's so much though that it's enacted with the government in detaining these doctors. You brought up this doctor who is in the West Bank, which I think that is important to note. But you also have hundreds of doctors in Gaza that are either imprisoned or have been murdered at the hands of the IDF. When you brought this story to my attention, it reminded me of, this man is Adnan al-Bush. He died in 2024. He was imprisoned by the IDF, and he was later brought to a hospital with rectal trauma. So if we can infer what happened to him, and he later succumbed to his injuries, he was an head of the orthopedic arm of the Al-Shifa hospital. And you have this other doctor, Abu Shafia, who has been imprisoned by Israel for over 500 days without any formal charge. He was the head, I believe, of pediatrics in Kamal Adwan Hospital. There is this very stark image. It was when Israel, the IDF, was forcibly evacuating the Kamal Adwan Hospital, that no one wanted to leave. The doctor, Abu Shafia, finally had convinced the people to do so. And he was the very last person to ever leave the hospital, which resulted in this image of him. This is the last image that we've seen of him as a free man, was him walking through rubble, approaching IDF tanks to then be captured. And now he's detained. And in this image that appears, we see scarring on his arms. He's visibly thinner. And his attorneys basically say that his health has deteriorated significantly. I believe and it's
not unreasonable to believe that the purpose in the detention is to subject hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people to untreated wounds because this important doctor is not able to do his work. The Israelis, they're very systematic in what they do. And they go after every element of the medical chain, every element of all of the things that support human life. The distribution of groceries, of food, they shut that down. The production of desalinated water, they shut this down. There's very little limitation on their cruelty. And this latest thing, it sort of moves to the West Bank, this crackdown on medical treatment. And so we see they know how to do it. They go after this fellow who, he's 71 years old for decades now. He's been providing medical care for all of the people. Now, Israel doesn't, they want the Palestinian people to die in the occupied West Bank. And so they don't care about them, but the Palestinians themselves just quietly have this network that operates to treat people, if they have breast cancer, if they need prostate surgery, all of these things that affect so many people. The Israelis are not going to help them, but this man does. And so they're very strategic, and they say, okay, let's take him out and see if we can begin collapsing this network so that there will be no medical care for the child who breaks his arm falling out of a tree. Just leave the arm broken, make them suffer. And it's like the fellow that you just showed, that very graphic picture of him, the last person walking out of the remains of that devastated. Look at that, slaughtered by just everything torn to nothing. And they pick him out. They say, okay, this guy is of extraordinary importance. He is an enormously capable doctor, and he's someone who's capable of training other doctors and instructing people how to care for the injured. Let's pluck him out, get him out of there. It's one of the great war crimes, I think, of my lifetime, is the crimes that are being committed by Israel in this Palestinian Holocaust.
I mean, the story of this man who got very little coverage, but the evidence was so clear of what had happened to him. Him being, he's an orthopedic doctor, and he was tortured, sexually tortured, to the point that it caused him irreparable harm, to where he lost his life. And he was a doctor. It was just pure evil in my sense. And I know that a lot of Americans share this sentiment, and that is why we have these palpable, these shifts in America, creating new parties, new forms of political divisions. I know that that's another topic that we wanted to talk about, is some of the primary elections that had come out, and we have kind of the fatigue, I would say, in the duopoly, for lack of better terms. We have new forms of political identities forming. I would say on the right, you kind of have this MAGA movement. And then on the left, you have, DSA, I guess we should say, the Mamdani's kind of endorsed groups, and their kind of new form in how to approach in correcting some of the legitimate grievances Americans have with the system that it stands. So I kind of want to use that as a pivot for our next segment.
Yeah, and an interesting issue here is that I know I'm Republican, and the Republicans are, they're obviously very interested in this shift towards the democratic socialist. Some who are just pretty much identified with communism and so forth. But I think Republicans make a mistake by failing to realize that one of the principal things that is injecting so much power into this socialist movement is not simply a love of communism versus capitalism, but this issue of Israel first, and this issue of Americans being expected to get on board with the slaughter of men, women, children, non-combatants, genocide. I fought very hard in Vietnam. I was wounded. I had my radio man killed right beside me during an attack that we had launched to rescue an outpost. And but as I was a very strong advocate for what we were doing over there, but there was a fellow, William Calley was his name. He was lieutenant. I think maybe he was a captain. But anyway, he, in the later stages of our involvement there, he led his company or his platoon in an attack on a civilian village, and they slaughtered a lot of people. I forget the numbers, but it was 200, 300, I'm not sure. And I mean, I had so much experience. I had fought side by side with the South Vietnamese. I had been responsible for prisoners of war in the battlefield, and I had dropped bombs. I had done the whole thing, so I knew what was going on, and I hated the story that I was hearing, but I instinctively knew it was true. And the first thing I thought, and this was shared by a great many military servicemen, this feeling that if I had been there, I'd have killed him. I'd have killed him on the spot, even if it meant I was going to die, to stop that slaughter.
Well, I think the story of Hugh Thompson, who is accredited of stopping the My Lai massacre, and he did so by turning the weapons on his fellow Americans and kind of telling them to stop what they were doing, is kind of the footprint of what I would claim to be true American. You realize what you're doing, and what the actions that your fellow brothers that under the guise of war you're supposed to go with them to the deaths. You step in front of them and you tell them, you check them in checking their morality and stopping them. Yeah. So I think that, that's kind of, what you're telling me, reminding me of is the story of like Hugh Thompson during the Vietnam War and him stopping the My Lai massacre.
And you have all the Hollywood anti-war propaganda and so forth towards the end. And of course, we fought for 10 years, and military organizations deteriorate over the years of war. But the fact is that culturally, Americans did not accept war crimes. Culturally, we believed in treating people humanely. And, we might be, we could be savage fighters, but we weren't savage fighters against civilians. Now, I guarantee you that there were some exceptions, and Cali was the greatest one that we know of. But the difference that we have now, you look at, we're allied with with Israel, where I'm sure there are differences of opinion within the IDF about what they're doing, but there seems to be such a broad-based acceptance of genocidal conduct and of just the deliberate infliction of suffering on people, almost for the fun of suffering. Even with Cali, with the My Lai massacre, they didn't just taunt the people; they killed people, indiscriminately. But they didn't just, nobody was anally sodomizing people with a device. Nobody was running over to zip tie somebody's penis just to make them suffer.
Or every single hospital in Gaza is riddled with shells and bullet holes and destroyed equipment from bombs. I mean, and that's what frightens me, is that you have this kind of this lulled apathy from a population that under I would think normal circumstances, it would appall people. To have any hospital that's destroyed, no matter the justification that anyone's giving towards it. Or, we had the Manab school, where we have that either it was an intelligence gathering base, either it was or it wasn't, you had little children there. And so it's just these things where it's like we contort ourselves and make it an acceptable military action. It really scares me in what's to come in these new engagements that we were here to witness, where we don't have any kind of morals or scruples of what is, off limits.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it's I don't like seeing Americans associated with this, because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, they are good people, and I just don't like them becoming associated with the Palestinian Holocaust.
Yeah.
This is something that, when it is eventually laid out, when all of this is said and done, it's going to reverberate for generations. It's a horror that it's not as large as what occurred in the later stages of World War II with the Nazis, but I think it certainly suggests a level of just deliberate cruelty that may go beyond what most of the Nazis were willing to accept.
Yeah, it's not like there needs to be a certain line that needs to be passed for us, like, to not accept just depravity and a lack of morals and like you say, cruelty. Like, there doesn't need to be a threshold of, if it exceeds kind of the worst of what we were brought up speaking about, which is the evils that were done in World War II, for it to be completely unacceptable. I find Israel's actions completely unacceptable, and it makes me sick to my stomach that my tax dollars go to it, that you have U.S. politicians that will bend over backwards to try and get you to be okay with it, or to completely dismiss you when they're supposed to represent you, and you basically voicing your opposition to this continued support of this nation, that our tax dollars pay for their healthcare, for their education, for their subsidized housing, all of what. And they continue to conduct themselves, make these actions, not making us look good on the international stage, and kind of aligning us with those actions. You have, I would say, as we're starting to kind of touch on this new subject of, the left, a lot of the left looks at the actions of Israel, and they correlate it with the actions of American service members. And, can we adequately blame them when we have representatives or executive branch that continues to sit down and be allies and give Israel exactly what they want? I can see where they come from in their resentment, and it emboldens them while we continue to sit next to Israel.
Yeah, and as we speak, Congress is, they're about to pass the big defense appropriations bill,
Yep.
and one element of that is a provision that will essentially integrate Israeli intelligence and American intelligence, and it will make America basically subject to Israel and to this global Zionist lobby, and it will really deprive the President of the United States of the ability to control our own intelligence resources. They've set up a mechanism that is just politically impossible for any president, Democrat or Republican, to ever resist with this Israeli lobby. And basically, it puts our military on a silver platter to Israel and says, here, take us and do with us what you will. You now have all of our intelligence, and they also have a provision, not only with the intelligence, but with defense production of the most sensitive weapons, that Israel will be integrated into the production of all American weapons, and they will be given access to all our most sensitive military technology so that they can sell it to other countries or do anything they want. It is just beyond belief that this is very close to being passed by a combination of pro-Israel Democrats and Republicans.
Yep, it's
And-
a unified effort.
I'm going to tell there are Republicans who I think Republicans who would sell out this country in a minute if it gives them favor with Israel. And there are likewise Democrat politicians, powerful top drawer Democrat politicians, who will sell out this country as long as it keeps them in the good graces of Israel.
Yeah.
And it's
I believe Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey, you have a Republican and a Democrat coming together to object to that segment within the National Defense Authorization Act, and it failed. Both parties, they wanted nothing to do with it. It was basically them asking to retract that form that integrates the Israeli intelligence apparatus with the American intelligence apparatus and other forms of the militaries together. They wanted nothing to do with it, and I think that speaks very loudly. And you have just this unified effort that you have constantly in America. You have just this palpable division. The left and the right, they can never get along. But when it comes to Israel, it's just a given, and it's insane. And I think when we look at Israel's just conduct, I would say in the past year, you had Joe Kent, who resigned under what he said was faulty intelligence by the Israeli government to get us into a direct engagement with Iran. You had Israel just time and time again neglecting the ceasefire that they were included in and continued to bomb Lebanon, saying they were not going to leave Lebanon, basically derailing the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, and they get rewarded with this. It is absolutely preposterous. And I think that's why you have these sentiments in America where they are craving something new, something where you can shake something up. And I think the very viral moment was Mamdani's when they were doing the debate for him to become governor. And they asked every single person, will you visit Israel? Which is a very strange question if you're going to be a governor of just a state of New York. And everyone said yes. Mamdani was the only one that said that he would stay in the boroughs serving the people of New York, which seems like it's a bottom line of what a representative should say. But that is, I think, the moment that he won.
Yeah. And, the visit to Israel is a very special thing. The Israel is sort of organized to host key people. There's sort of a propaganda tour that they conduct, and they sort of make it seem, oh, this is the Holy Land, and look at this, and there are Christian sites in Israel, and oh, look at this, we're protecting these Christian sites. They never say that we despise Christians and we kill Christian Palestinians just as quickly as we do Muslim Palestinians. But it's a great propaganda tour. And when you commit, yes, I will go to Israel, it's sort of like being a member of a club. It's sort of that's your pass. Oh yes, I'll go there, and I will be indoctrinated, and I'll come back and I'll be able to sing the songs, and if they manage to blackmail me while I'm over there, well, I guess that's life, and I'll get some money and I'll get other things out of it.
Matt Gaetz speaks of it. He said when he was a representative, he was invited to go to Israel. He went to Israel. He was very perplexed by the itinerary that they constantly had stuff they were doing. They were going these places. It was almost like a mandatory. You had to do these things. And he brushed off some plans one day and went back to his hotel room, and he found an individual in his hotel room that made him very uneasy. He speaks about that. He speaks about basically it was a surveillance campaign to probably try and to either find some stuff on him or bug his belongings. We don't know, but he speaks about that experience and being very unsettled by it. And they have a campaign where they take freshman representatives and senators every year. And they encourage the freshmen to come, and that's kind of their intro into the indoctrination. And we spoke about it with Jose, where we talked about the grooming even prior to federal offices. The individual like Richie Torres would take visits to Israel often prior to him even being a city council member. So it was this molding and grooming before he's even in any position of power to make sure that he is a solidified ally. When he is in power, he does not budge. So that is, another thing that I find appalling as well, is just this methodical generational outlook, and how do we solidify the allegiance between America and Israel when it really is just to only serve the interests of Israel.
Yeah. There's nothing in this that is beneficial to the United States. That would be one thing. If somehow the United States were gaining something. We often hear it said that Israel is our bestest ally in the region or something like that. There's really no support at all. I mean, they've dragged us into multiple wars. They attacked our Liberty ship, almost sunk it back in 1973, rather than have us get in the way of what they were doing. And and I remember as a lieutenant in Vietnam, there was a very famous, very well regarded Israeli general, Moshe Dayan. He wore a patch on one eye, making him very distinctive. He had been wounded in battle, and he came to visit our company, the company that I was with, that held the ridge line at Nui Loxon. He wanted to see what things were like out there, and but what struck me as interesting, the United States had virtually given birth to Israel in 1948. I mean, we, tremendous political support to bring about the takeover. Basically, you had Jewish refugees out of Europe who came and occupied Palestine, which was a mix of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim, and all living very peacefully. But then the Europeans came in and they created a tremendous terror campaign of murder, rape, and so forth, and just drove the indigenous people out. And that was the formation of Israel in 1948 that it began.
Mm.
Uh, and and so, you know, you would think that here the United States then goes to war in Vietnam, and you would think, well, this is a chance for a little bit of payback. The Israelis can send some troops, and they can, you know, at least have the flag there and so forth. Now that had happened with the South Koreans. We had fought with South Korea in the Korean War, and they were our biggest allies outside of South Vietnam itself. I think there were about 500,000 South Koreans who fought in Vietnam, very fine fighters at the time. And so that was payback, but there was no payback from Israel. So they have never, you know, served with us. They serve themselves, and then they order U.S. presidents to get on board and invade this country, that country, invade Iraq, invade Libya, invade Syria, invade all of these places.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
it's very one-sided, and I think that's why you have this this noticeable political shift in America when it comes to both left and right, because they are just so fatigued with the status quo. You know, Trump ran on this No New Wars platform, which got him a lot of support, because that alone was, I mean, even in his 2016 run where he was talking about how, you know, was the biggest mistake was to go into Iraq. And a lot of Americans felt that way. A lot of Americans lost, you know, their sons, their daughters. You know, Joe Kent, his wife was actually murdered by ISIS in Syria. You know, just these unnecessary engagements that we continue to find ourselves in.
mm-hmm.
You have Americans that need it, that want it to stop. And it just seems like it's just this ever rolling snowball of, no matter who we can kind of get in there that kind of says these things, it doesn't necessarily come to true whenever they actually obtain that power. So you have these really dramatic shifts, and I feel like that's you could see it coming, I should say, for lack of better terms.
You know, Morgan, I gave, in the 2016 campaign, President Trump, guy has phenomenal energy, and he traveled to, I think, 7 different states, and he held rallies. And he was just on such a high that night that he decided, let's add Virginia to the list. And I had cautioned him. He and I had a fairly lengthy discussion, because I was a surrogate speaker for him during the 2016 campaign all over Virginia. And he stopped after one of the things, and he called me over, and he said, are we gonna win Virginia? And I said, I don't think so. And then we got in a lengthy discussion, and anyway, you know, they were trying to drag him away to the next to the flight. He said, no. He said, I need to talk to this guy. So we talked for quite a while. He was a good listener. Anyway, but so all this goes on, and then on the final day, he adds in Virginia, because he really wanted to win it, and I really wanted him to win, but I just didn't see it happening. Anyway, there was tremendous enthusiasm for him, and you know, he just fell a little bit short in Virginia. But I gave the last speech. You know, there's always a warm-up speech before the president comes on, and I got kind of a last minute call saying, oh, Trump's added us in. We're going to have a meeting in Leesburg. And word went out, and all of a sudden people began to flood into this venue in Leesburg. And by the time that I got there, with no notes, no preparation, and I asked the police officer as I was driving in. I was the senator for the area. And I said, how many have we got now? He said there are 25,000, but he said there are people lined up for miles coming out. So they're going to continue to build until he gets here. It was hours before he arrived, but I got up to give the warm-up speech, and an emphasis for me was the ending of these wars, and particularly the one in Syria, where we had Al Qaeda. We were funding and working with Al Qaeda to overthrow the constitutional government. And when I got up and I spoke, and I talked about how President Trump was going to bring us to peace, he was going to end these nonsense wars, and people were delirious. I mean, the crowd was just delirious with joy, applause, cheering, and everything. And then Trump comes on, and of course they were wild about Trump, so sad that Trump tried 3 times to pull us out of Syria, but that deep state thing that's largely orchestrated by the same people who are the backers of Israel, they just dug their heels in, and President Trump could not, even though he actually ordered one. He said, I am ordering that all troops be removed expeditiously from Syria. And right away, the Secretary of Defense resigned to break the chain of command. And then you had John Bolton. He flew off to Tel Aviv to announce that no, we're not doing this, and just basically countermanded the President of the United States. It was just nightmarish. It was the U.S. government totally out of control of the American people. But Donald Trump tried several times to pull us out, and he just couldn't get the government to obey him. So, but I want to just touch on this. I know we're about the end of the period, but what's happening with the Democratic primaries is quite dramatic. Now we know what happened in New York. It was just a wipeout. It's the old line entrenched pro-Israel politicians in New York were just wiped out. And it was the congressmen, the members of the Senate and the House and the state. Everybody lost, and they were ousted by these democratic socialists, very extreme people in some cases. But the key issue is that it was the pro-Israel incumbents who went down. Now, you could say, okay, this is kind of a one-off thing, but it has also happened in Colorado, and it's also happened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So we got 3 states now where this is a pretty dramatic thing. Not to say that AIPAC, the American-Israeli PAC, it has become politically toxic in some areas, but there's still a very powerful force that translates fear, and I think ultimately blackmail fear and money, translates that into obedience by American politicians. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because in many ways it creating significant tensions within the Democratic Party between the old guard and the new incumbent, or the new insurgents. We'll see what happens, but it's going to be quite a wild ride, I think.
Yeah, I think it's going to be certainly an interesting election on the 250th anniversary of the country, which is a very country in its infancy. So I think that we have to really kind of uh, demand better and be more vigilant when it becomes to the citizenry actually engaging and governing the representatives and what they need to do. Because right now I think that they're kind of running loose and doing whatever they want to do and kind of look at themselves as lords as opposed to public servants. And I think that that is kind of something that we need to reaffirm, because the American project was not meant to be that way. It was actually to be a complete rejection of that kind of ideology.
Well, I know that all of our blue collar tradesmen that I'm going to be celebrating with in a few hours would certainly agree to the idea that that our government needs to get its head on straight. It needs to start listening to the people who make the wheels turn in America and stop being so obedient to foreign taskmasters.
Certainly.
But anyway, I'm going to enjoy the 4th. I think our country, for all of its problems, I helped to support a German fellow that I met when he was a little boy, and I was a lieutenant colonel in Germany, and he was expected not to live very long. He's got cancer, and he was given a fairly short time to live. He is doing better now, but he applied for his pension, and his pension was denied. They said, "Oh, you can work," and he's been hospitalized most of recent months. And so he wrote how distraught he was at what's happened to Germany, that everything is being given to the migrants. They get all of the housing. They don't pay anything. It's all paid for them. And he had tried to get an apartment, and there were like a dozen people there all at once, and in the end the government took it for the migrants coming in. And so you just, I remember what Germany was like when I was stationed there. It was a socialist country, but it was not a place of enormous highs and lows like you often see in socialism. And it was they took very good care of the people. But now we've got this with the European Union. Now the people of the nation states of Europe have no representation whatsoever. They're voiceless. They can't elect their chief executive. And when they elect members of the European Parliament, the parliamentarians cannot introduce legislation. All they can do is approve what comes down to them. I mean, it's an absolute dictatorship. I wish America understood. But anyway, I look at their situation where the French, the Germans, the Brits, they are voiceless. All they can do is street actions, demonstrations, and but even what they say, that you can be convicted of a crime if you say certain things.
They do not have a First Amendment like we do.
No. In Great Britain, they had a fellow who was fatally knifed, and as he was dying, he said, "I was just attacked by these Asians," and the police who decided to handcuff this bleeding, dying man said, you better mind your talk. This is, the law doesn't allow you to use racist talk. He identified who the people were. There were some Sikhs, and I mean the level of tyranny has just gotten so extreme that we don't even understand. Americans don't understand, because you and I, we speak pretty freely. And nobody's coming to kill us yet, so we're okay for the time being. But anyway, Morgan, you have a great 4th, and I'm looking forward to having a great 4th also.
Thank you, Senator. And I want to encourage everybody to tune in next week to focus on the news.
We'll see you then.